Hey, it's Bianca Williams, therapist, coach, wife, and mom, here to talk to you about another self growth tip. And today, what I would love to talk about is boundaries. And anybody who knows me knows just how important it is for you to use boundaries. And so, I am going to tell you 3 main reasons why it's important for you to have boundaries. Probably, I can see me in a future video going through a more deeper explanation of how to use boundaries. But for today, I want to get more into why boundaries are important. Essentially, when people think of boundaries, they think about something that is protecting them in some way. And so it is, but I'm going to explain it in a way that's not quite what you think, but it's going to make sense. I mean, it's going to kind of click. So just pay attention and see how this applies to you. Okay, so as I just said, boundaries is more about how you are protecting yourself in some way. And a lot of people think of that as protecting yourself from others. But I'm here to tell you, boundaries is not just about protecting yourself from others. It's also about how you treat yourself and ultimately what you teach other people and how you would like to be treated. And so, for the purposes of today, because boundaries can be talked about in so many ways, I'm going to more so focus on it from the emotional space. Okay. And so, I said I had 3 main reasons why you should use boundaries, and let's get into that. So, reason number 1 why it's very important for you to use boundaries is because it helps you to learn how to identify your needs and actually communicate that instead of your emotions. A lot of times, when boundaries are not in place, we as humans will communicate from an emotional space because that is what we're feeling. That is what, in some way, that's how we're impacted in that moment. And so we feel the need to respond to that. Whereas boundaries actually help you to do some internal reflection to identify what am I needing? Because if I'm finding myself feeling something that maybe I don't want to feel, that makes me want to, communicate or say something or have some kind of reaction to it, then I probably should be able to communicate that instead. And the biggest thing to get from that point is that you are ultimately responsible for your own emotional health. When you're communicating your emotions to people, you're essentially saying, hey, for whatever reason, I need you to take care of my emotions. And that's just not realistic and it's not going to sustain, right? Like people are going to disappoint you. People are not going to know how to protect you in that way. And so because it's our responsibility to protect our own emotions, you have to figure out what you need in order to keep your emotional space safe. And when you understand what you need, then you can communicate that. That's where you set those parameters. So that's reason number 1 why boundaries are absolutely important. Now, to get into reason number 2, boundaries essentially helps us feel a sense of peace and security, right? Like we put boundaries in place to essentially set these rules to protect ourselves, these limits to protect ourselves. And so if you are having to put a barricade essentially around you, then there's something that feels safe inside of that. There's something that feels secure and gives you a sense of peace. When you don't feel peace and security, guess what gets triggered? You got it, those emotions. And when you have those emotions getting triggered, then what do? Remember what I said in the last point. You react. You're reacting to your emotions instead of to your needs because your emotions aren't feeling that emotional peace. They're not feeling that security. And when you don't feel safe, secure, or at peace, you are essentially reacting to something that is threatening that. And you don't want anything to threaten your security, your peace, right? And your safety. So, feeling a sense of peace and security is important, but in order to do that, we have to create limits and barriers and boundaries around us to say, how do we keep things that we don't want from disrupting us or getting into this space to where we can get a little bit emotionally unraveled? So feeling peace and security is the second reason you ultimately definitely want to have some boundaries put in place. And the final reason why you want to have boundaries put in place is because it allows you to take responsibility for how you're treated. Remember, I said earlier that your emotions are ultimately your responsibility. Well, actually, yes, that's true. And the only way that you're going to be able to allow that to happen is if you protect them. And so, how are you going to protect your emotions, right? You have to take responsibility for how you are treated. And how this is powerful is that instead of feeling attacked or blaming people for how you are being mistreated, you actually set the parameters and you apply them. So no one is constantly penetrating this space that you have created to protect yourself because you have created the rules. And so I think of things like, I don't know, let's say you're going into a crowded space, right? I want to go to a store to get some shoes or something. When you go into that store, you don't just walk in there and expect to walk out with your shoes. You know that I have to walk in here, I have to maybe try these shoes on. I want to make sure they fit. I want to, make sure that I take some time out to pay for these shoes, right? That's kind of the big one. That is the boundary of purchasing something from an establishment, is that I have to actually come in here and expect to pay. You know that going in because that's a rule that they've been able to enforce. But you think that they're going to let you walk out and not say anything, or at least not try to stop you? Most stores are going to have something in place that in some way warrants off people just taking things out of there without paying. And that's their way of setting that boundary. And so think of your emotional space as that same way. Like you ultimately have to protect yourself from being having your emotions stolen from you, or your peace stolen from you, your security invaded in some way, right? You create that space. Another example I can think of is, let's say you're a person who doesn't like people wearing shoes in your home, right? Like, so, I mean, I know people like that. You come in their house and they like take your shoes off. They don't want dirt tracked across their floors. They may have small pets, or they may have a child and they don't want them picking up things that maybe fall off your feet when you come in. And so some people, they literally like want you to take your shoes off when you come in their houses. But for some people, that's not enough, because you still have the ability to track something in their house, even if you take off your shoes. Or maybe some people respect that, everybody is not going to be willing to take off their shoes, or they don't feel comfortable doing that. And so some people create other scenarios in which they may have shoe covers or feet covers, or something that allows, maybe socks, something that allows someone to walk around in their house in the way that feels secure for them. And so having socks, having a rule that there's no shoes, having foot covers, whatever that is, that allows them to, in a sense, protect that space, to make that space feel secure for them. And if you don't say that, right, if somebody walks in your house and you don't say that, then people are going to just wear their shoes, track their dirt, whatever, right? And you're going to be feeling some type of way, and maybe even getting offended because now your floors are getting dirty and this person is not aware that you feel this way. And so when you think about boundaries, think about this is your rules and your limits to protect yourself. It's not someone else's responsibility to know what those are. So you have to enforce those and set those. And so just for a reminder, the three main reasons why boundaries and limits are important is because it helps you to learn and identify your needs so that you can actually communicate those instead of your emotions. It allows you to feel peace and security, right? So that you don't respond to the emotional triggers. And it allows you to take responsibility for how you're treated so that you're not blaming and attacking others for how you feel mistreated. This is Bianca Williams, therapist, coach, mother, and wife, here delivering more self-growth tips. Guys, stay tuned. Like I said, boundaries is a topic for me, so I can go down a deep rabbit hole talking about this, but just stay tuned. I will be dropping more self-growth tips, and maybe another one on boundaries in a different way, maybe another one on a completely different subject. If it's something that's important for you to hear my perspective on, definitely share that with me, and continue to support my podcast and my other social media platforms. Sign up for my mailing list because I am going to be releasing something special soon, and I would love for you to be able to take part in that first. My website, it's going to be below in this podcast segment, but also just so you can hear it, www.biancawilliamslpc.com. See you soon. Bye.